All right, take it away, Allison.
Got it. Good evening, everybody. I just want to confirm that everyone can see the PowerPoint on the screen. Cool. I'm not hearing anybody protesting, so I'm going to assume that you can see and hear me. As Hillary explained, my name is Allie DeMedeiros. I'm the attorney for the Philadelphia Fair Housing Commission. Just a little bit about my background before I start talking. I'm going to be doing the first half of the presentation, and then I'm going to be followed by Joan, who will can either introduce herself after me, or when she starts going, it'll be up to her. So I've lived in Philly for about 10 years. I went to the University of Delaware for my undergraduate degree and graduated from Temple Law School in 2015. After I graduated and after I clerked with a judge for a little while, I started doing landlords eviction suits across the state and in New Jersey, but mainly in Philadelphia. So for 2 years, I worked for the second biggest eviction firm in the city, doing about, God, close to 80 eviction cases a day. So now, since 2020, I work at the Philadelphia Fair Housing Commission, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. But basically, we are an administrative body that allows tenants to make complaints about actions of their landlords that are either retaliatory or against Philadelphia law. Joan, do you want to say hi now, or would you prefer to wait?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and joining us this evening. My name is Joan Balfus. I am a paralegal in the housing unit at Community Legal Services. I'm from Philadelphia, from South Philadelphia specifically. My background is I went to Penn State University. I'm really passionate about housing law because just my family's been through it a lot over the years. So I've seen firsthand how evictions can impact people and just how little things can snowball into an eviction. So I'm just really passionate about educating people about their rights. I've been with CLS for 5 years, where I work on eviction defense and community outreach initiatives. And I'm excited to talk to you all tonight.
Thanks, Joan. So just a quick roadmap of where we're going. I'm going to handle the first three agenda items: finding housing, moving in, and common tenant issues. Then I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Joan for moving out, the eviction process, and tenant resources. Generally, before I get started, I like to ask people kind of where they're coming from. This might be hard to do on Zoom, but I'm going to do my best. If you have never rented an apartment before, can you raise your hand? Okay, cool. If you are a Philadelphia local, can you raise your hand? Oh, awesome. Okay, great. Okay, so that's good. I've got a good idea of who we're looking at. Okay, so, oop, and of course, I immediately overly advanced the slides. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is how you go about finding housing, especially in Philadelphia. So people come to find housing in a variety of different ways. Most of them, I would presume at this point, are online. The most common ways that we run into are things like Zillow, Trulia, Apartments.com, and Craigslist. Myself, I think I've found every single apartment I've ever rented on Craigslist. And I know Zillow is also helpful. There's also options of contacting a real estate company and hiring an agent who can help you find what's in your budget in your area. When you are going through online postings, especially, it's very important to look at the listings and the ads and rent carefully. Things you should consider when you're about to apply for housing are the types of things that landlords are going to look at when you go ahead and submit an application. You're going to want proof of ID, including a facial ID. You're going to need proof of income, pay stubs, or a tax statement. Most places are going to require an application fee or a hold fee in order to keep yourself in the running to look at the apartment, especially if it's competitive. And frequently, almost always, especially in Philadelphia, landlords are going to require some deposit, usually first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit. Application fees generally are non-refundable, and they are the type of thing you're going to have to pay in order to either put in your application or see the apartment. But if you start paying things like first, last, or security deposit, which we're talking about larger sums of money, you should not do that until you have a signed lease and working keys. That's going to be a common theme throughout this presentation, is that everything in writing, you want to get absolutely everything you can in writing, and you're also going to want to make sure things work. So once you know what you need to apply, you're going to want to make sure you have a budget, right? So the question becomes, can you afford the property? Landlords, I think I already covered this, will ask for pay stubs and proof that you can make the monthly rent, things that you can totally consider when you're trying to make a rent obligation or whether or not you want to have roommates. There are consequences and benefits of having roommates that we'll talk through, I think, in a couple of slides. But roommates are a thing that younger and first-time renters have to do. Another thing to consider is a cosigner. Cosigners are like roommates who do not live with you. So the cosigner is on the lease. They sign your lease, but they do not live in your property. What's really important to know, and for your cosigner to know, is that they are legally held responsible if you fall behind on your rent. So the one that Joan and I run into all the time is that Allie stops paying her rent. And Allie had her mom, Denise, sign the lease with her so Allie could afford the rent. Then when Allie misses the rent, a letter comes not just to Allie, but to Denise, Allie's mom, and it says, hey, you got to go to court. Denise shows up and is shocked because she doesn't owe the landlord thousands of dollars. She has her own house. And she's concerned about her credit. It's good to know, and it's good for your parents to know, because it's frequently parents or relatives or friends. It's good for them to know that if you fall behind on your rent, they absolutely can be held responsible. So I'm going to move on to roommates briefly. So should you get a roommate? The answer can frequently be yes, and the answer can frequently be no. So the first thing that you should consider is, can both of you afford the rent, and how are you going to divvy it up? So people choose to do this on different bases. For instance, when I was in college, I shared my room and a bathroom with a female roommate, and another male roommate occupied a separate room in his own bathroom. He paid more rent. But people split down the middle. Either way, what we're going to recommend you do is get separate leases for your specific portion, specifically saying what you are to pay. This way, you are going to be only responsible for the amount that it says you owe in your lease. If you sign one lease for the full amount, you could be taken to task for the whole amount. So let me break it down. So say Joan and I are renting an apartment together, and it's $2,000 a month. And the understanding is that Joan will pay $1,000 and I will pay $1,000. If first at some point I stop paying the rent, I just say, I don't have it, I'm not going to pay it. The landlord, if Joan and I signed one lease that says Joan and Allie live at this apartment and they owe $2,000 a month, the landlord can absolutely go after me for the full $2,000, after Joan for the full $2,000, and after both of us for an individual portion. 9 times out of 10, landlords are going to go for who has money. So that means poor Joan, who's paying her rent, is likely going to be on the hook for the full amount of the rent. If, better scenario, Joan has her own lease and it says Joan owes $1,000, and I have my own lease and it says Allie owns $1,000, Joan has not breached her lease and the landlord can only go after me. So what you're going to want to do is get it in a separate lease terms. The other thing you should totally consider is whether or not you two get along, or you 2 or 3 get along. So if your roommate decides that 2 months in that your apartment is now a 24-hour-a-day party pad, and that there are going to be people over all the time, and that you're not going to be able to sleep, eat, or function without other people in your space, you cannot refuse to pay your rent to your landlord, because your roommate is a third party who is doing something to affect your ability to live in the property. Your landlord has not breached the lease. Therefore, it's very likely you're going to be awake 24 hours a day and still paying your landlord rent. It's possible that your landlord could choose to go ahead and evict your roommate for being crappy. However, it takes a while, it's hard to do, and it's not going to affect how much you owe in rent. Sorry. Having a hard time seeing my last bullet because of my share bar. So you should also plan. Yeah, so you should also plan for what you are able to do in the event that things go south. So this happens a lot when people are romantic partners moving in together. You do not see that there could be a problem until the problem is right there, and then it's something as serious as your housing. So it's important to have either an escape plan or to be pretty well acquainted with somebody before you go ahead and move in with them. If at any point anyone has questions, you can always put them in the chat or raise your hand. I won't be able to see hands because I have the PowerPoint up, but somebody can let me know. Okay. Sorry. A big thing that's really important when you're looking for rental space, especially in a big rental market like Philadelphia, is avoiding scams. So this link here, the first thing I tell tenants to do is go ahead and put the address in that link listed under the L&I website. So this allows you to search a property in Philadelphia. It will tell you the name of the owner. It will tell you whether or not the owner has a rental license. It will tell you whether or not there are open code violations on the property. These are important things to know before you go ahead and get started. Another important thing to do is once you have confirmed that the person you are talking to is the owner or a representative of the owner, go ahead and get photo ID. So people should be able to prove to you that they are who you say they are. You're never going to want to just take somebody's word that they own a property. You should never give money beyond an application fee after you have verified ownership to anyone without seeing the property. So a common one that happens a lot is, and when I say seeing the property, I mean making an appointment, showing up, watching somebody with a key open the apartment who looks like they belong in the apartment, accessing the apartment. A common one that happens in Philly is people will show up and the person showing the apartment doesn't have a key, or they are standing outside the apartment and offer you to go in or offer you a lease but cannot show you the inside. You're going to want to be sure that you are inside the apartment, that you have keys that work and a signed lease before you hand over absolutely any money, because people will absolutely take thousands of dollars off of you in security deposit, and you will have no ability to get in the house. The other thing that sometimes happens is a tenant who, it's not the owner who you're seeing, it's a tenant. And the tenant is moving out of the property and they are acting as if they're an owner, showing you the property and then handing you keys. Then you find out in a year or 2 years that the real owner has no idea you're in there. And you've been paying the wrong person rent this whole time. You're also going to want to use as much common sense as possible. So make sure the cost of the unit makes sense. A luxury home will not be rented out for $500 a month. Multiple bedrooms will not be rented out for $500 a month. And when in doubt, do not hand over money. If you're a victim of the scam, your options to get the money back are virtually none. Cool. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about the Renters Access Act. This is typically handled by the sister organization of my commission, which is the Philadelphia Human Relations Commission. I'm going to go through it quickly. Any questions, I might have to refer you out to somebody from the PCHR, but that's okay. So recently in Philadelphia, the city council passed something called the Renters Access Act. This defines when and how a landlord can use a tenant's rental and credit history. So landlords have to give their tenants, they have to keep and provide to you a written screening criteria explaining what they look at when they approve or deny an application. And this must be a universal criteria. They can't pick and choose what they look at for each individual person. They also must look at your rental application and cannot have a blanket denial for credit score or eviction record. So they can't say things like, if your credit is below 500, I will not rent to you. They cannot say things like, if you have ever been filed on in an eviction court, that I cannot rent to you. So the Renters Access Act allows tenants to have a variety of options if their application is denied. Oh, I just want to backtrack. So just because they cannot have a blanket rule does not mean that they cannot deny you because you have a low credit score or a history of eviction. They absolutely can deny you because you have a low credit score and a history of eviction, but they cannot have a blanket rule like that. They have to look at the individual and assess the application as a whole. So if your application is denied, what does your landlord have to do now? They have to let you know they denied your application within 3 business days. They have to give you a copy of anything they looked at to make their decision. So that's going to be your credit report, and that's going to be a copy of any evictions you might have had. Some landlords will also use certain computer systems or websites to do background checks on people. That's also what they have to show you. And they have to they have to review any documents you give them for reconsideration if you say they are incorrect. So one that I've had come up multiple times is accidentally somebody has a common name and Michael Williams is filed against in eviction court. And for some reason the birth date's wrong. And every time this Michael Williams shows up, who has never been filed on in his life, shows up, it shows he's got an eviction. So you have the right to show your landlord that I am not that person. I didn't rent that house. I didn't get evicted. And similar things like that. If there's an issue with the credit or a background check, you can also do that. For more information on this, there's a really good link on phillytenant.org that's there. I also have the contact information for the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations. Cool. All right, back to things I that are more in my wheelhouse. So you have looked at an apartment, you have not been scammed, you have paid your deposits, you have determined whether or not you are going to have roommates. You now have a lease which you have signed before, and you have keys in hand, you are in the house. Or maybe you haven't quite signed it yet, you're looking at it. So a lease is a legal document that dictates the term of your tenancies. Read every single page before you sign it. Ask questions if you do not understand. If you violate anything in the lease that you signed, it can put you at risk for eviction. So you're going to want to ask questions and you're going to want to get clarity, even if it feels uncomfortable. And landlords should be open to you doing that. If a landlord should want you to understand what's in your lease. So if you find resistance to this, it could be a red flag and something to consider. Because landlords ultimately want money and they want you to not damage their property. So they have a real vested interest in you asking questions and understanding. So if somebody's acting weird or strange, use your common sense. It might be a sign that's not the landlord for you. So important things to think about. How long is my lease? In Philadelphia, how long your leases can matter. You should know how long it is. It could be for a year, for 6 months, or it could renew every single month. Leases can have different terms. It's very important that you know how long you're supposed to be in that property. It's also important to know, how does your lease renew? Is it going to renew automatically? Is the term of it going to change? Frequently in Philadelphia, the first year will be a year lease, and then after that, it will go month to month. Some places require you to sign a new lease, and some will automatically renew yearly too. You don't want to find out at the end of your lease or at the beginning. You don't want to think you're in a month-to-month lease and then find out your lease renewed for another year, right? If you're planning on moving. So it's important you always have that number in mind and you know how long you're supposed to be here and what you have to do if you want to stay longer or leave. When you move into the property, in addition to a lease, there are certain things that you should get in hand in writing from your landlord. It's required that the landlord hand you something called a certificate of rental suitability. I think we have a packet with an example that is going to be provided, so you see what these look like. I don't have them embedded in the PowerPoint. But a certificate of rental suitability is a piece of paper that's issued by the city, and it just ensures that at the time you get that piece of paper, there are no code violations on the property. Your landlord has to sign it, and they have to give it to you. Certificates of rental suitability are dated and they have a expiration date. So you want to make sure there's 2 dates right at the top, that the date it's being handed to you are in between those 2 dates. The landlord also has to hand you something called a Partners for Good Housing Handbook. It's a pamphlet, it's several pages. It has a picture of a smiling family on the front of it. It describes some of your rights and duties as a tenant. It also gives you a lot of resources on who to contact if things go south. They have to hand both of those things to you. If they do not hand those things to you, they cannot collect rent from you. I see chat. Okay, so Joan is dropping those things in so you can see them, which is super helpful. Thank you. Oh, and Carolyn's doing it too. Cool. The second thing, which is relatively new in Philadelphia that needs to be handed to you is a lead certificate. So recently, the city council passed an ordinance requiring that all properties in Philadelphia that are built before 1978 have to be tested for lead, and the landlord has to produce for you a certificate that says the property is lead safe or lead free. This is whether or not you have children, and that's new. It used to only be if you had kids. Now it's for everybody. If you do not have that document in addition to your CRS and your Good Housing Handbook, the landlord cannot collect rent from you. It's important to know these, to know those 3 documents are something you're going to want to go ahead and get. Let's see. Before you move in, it's also important that you do a walkthrough of the property. In addition to writing, we're gonna encourage you to take photos of things you see. So when you walk through a property, I would take photos of every single room, every single closet, so that when you move, you have, and make sure they're time stamped, which most cell phones will do automatically. Because when you move, you want to be able to say, this is what it looked like when I moved in, right? That way the landlord can't say that you did damage you did not do. If you see areas in the property that are damaged, you're going to want to make sure you take extra pictures of those, and make it clear to your landlord that that existed before you were there. You're going to want to check your lease to make sure that the appliances that are listed are there. If you have to provide an appliance, you want to make sure that you document with your landlord that that is your appliance. So for example, I moved into a place with no fridge one time, and at the end of the lease, predictably always, the landlord conveniently forgets that that's your fridge. Fridges are not cheap. So you're going to want to have proof that is your fridge, preferably something that your landlord signed that said that's your fridge and you can leave with it. I don't know how common this is anymore, but if you're bringing something that is going to be essential to the property, like a washer, a dryer, a dishwasher, make sure the landlord acknowledges that in writing. You're going to want to test appliances when you walk through. You're going to want to test light switches. You're going to want to turn on plumbing. Again, this is another good landlord test. If a landlord acts weird, because you are turning on lights, you are taking pictures, you are looking at faucets and windows to make sure things are good, that's a sign that maybe it's not the best landlord. So don't feel shy or unconfident about doing what you need to do to make sure your housing is good. And document. Pets are another important thing. Before you sign a lease, you should be sure that your landlord knows the animals you will have in that house are there. I know it's tempting, especially where places list no animals, to avoid a pet fee or avoid any sort of damage, a security deposit for pets, or having to provide information about the pets. However, if you have a pet in your property and a landlord does not want you there anymore, for any reason, but a pet is a really easy one to prove. You either do or you do not have an iguana, a cat, a dog, a bird in the property. So landlords will frequently go for pets when they have another reason to not want you there, or because they don't want animals there that you shouldn't have there. So you're going to want to make sure that your animals are in writing in the lease. Usually name and breed is what I go for. And you may be charged a pet fee. You want to make sure you make note of what you paid and what the policy is for that pet fee. Do I get it back if Fluffy doesn't ruin anything? Or are they going to keep it either way? It should be important to note that that if you have a service animal or an emotional support animal, they are not pets. So a service animal generally is going to be an animal that you need to do the physical parts of your life. Common examples are seizure dogs, helper monkeys, seeing eye dogs, etc. Additionally, there are emotional support animals that are required for you to function emotionally, but maybe not physically. Because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, you have a right to have service animals and emotional support animals, but you should still certainly have them in your lease and certainly have the landlord aware of what the animal is and what they're needed for, because you want to avoid discrimination. Cool. Let's see. All right. Another thing to consider when you move in is what you're going to be paying for utilities in addition to rent. So most properties in Philadelphia are going to have you pay your utilities, usually at least electric and gas. Frequently water. Generally in Philadelphia, the electric and the gas will go in your name. The water bill tends to stay in the landlord's name, but the landlord should provide you any bills that you should see a bill you are paying, right? So if the landlord is keeping the water bill in their name, that's okay. However, you should see a physical copy of your bill every month before you pay it. Your lease will state which utilities are covered by the landlord and which are to be paid by you. Utilities or failing to put them in your name could be breaches of your lease. So you want to make sure you know what you're paying before you move in. And it's a valid reason to go ahead and evict you for missing utility payments under most leases. Here, the next couple slides are going to be some information about what you need to do PICO or to do electric, gas, and I believe water and cable, maybe. I'm not going to go through these very specifically, but these are really helpful links for you to have when you're setting up. We will provide a copy of the PowerPoint. There's also information here about payment assistance if for some reason you cannot make your bill. So in Philly, I skipped it, but PECO is the electrical service, Philadelphia Electric Company, and PGW is the gas service. That's Philadelphia Gas Works. And then let's see. For water, I think I already went over this, but the water is usually in the landlord's name. If you have to get the water service in your name, there's a lot of information on how to do it. If you're having a dispute with your landlord over a water bill, Community Legal Services Energy Unit is a very invaluable resource. Their number is here. I'm not going to go through the numbers, but this is just a good general slideshow to have. Cable, 95% of the time, you're going to be responsible for your own cable and internet. Information on how to get those are right here. Generally, if you're required to get it, the landlord can't like require you to get internet or evict you for internet. It's really just going to be electric, gas, and water. Another thing a landlord might require you to get in your lease is renter's insurance. Even if your lease doesn't say you have to get renter's insurance, getting renter's insurance is a really good idea, because if something bad happens to the property, your landlord is generally not going to have to pay you for that. So even if the property is set on fire, it floods, if your stuff is damaged, most of the time, a landlord is not going to be required to pay you, but rental insurance will. So you're going to want to read your lease to see if it's a requirement and how much you should purchase. If a lease makes you purchase rental insurance, it will say what your cap needs to be. You want to make sure what you're getting matches your cap, because again, this is another convenient thing that landlords, if a landlord wants to evict you and it says in your lease that you need renter's insurance, this is an easy way. You either have it or you don't. The average cost of renter's insurance is $212 per year, $18 a month, which is interesting. And I did not, every time I read it, it seems pretty reasonable. Examples of good places to go are right here on this slide. All right, so we're going to go into common tenant issues at this point. So the first one and the biggest one is paying your rent. Your lease will list a date that your rent is due. Sometimes they will give you a grace period. So it's due on the 1st, it's late after the 5th. On the 6th, you'll get charged a late fee. That's usually the scheme in Philly. However, frequently, rent can be due on mid-month. It can be due week to week. You're going to want to make sure, obviously, you know what that is before you go ahead and agree to it. You're also going to want to make sure that you know how you have to pay your rent. So if it's cash, if it's check, portal, or like a landlord. So sometimes landlords will have their own database that you have to sign up for in order to pay your rent, money order, or a phone app. It's very important that you know how you're going to pay and that you pay in such a way that you can prove you have paid. So do not hand anybody cash without a receipt. Generally, I would say do not hand anybody cash. A money order would be the way I would go if your landlord is saying you need to pay only cash. If a landlord will not, again, I'm going to talk about landlord red flags. If you run into a landlord who is telling you they only take cash and they will not give you a receipt, that's a good red flag. Because most landlords are happy to help you document your payments. You want to have a landlord that's happy to help you document your payment. What happens if you fall behind on your rent? This is against intuition, but what you should really do is talk to your landlord immediately. I know the instinct is to be like, well, I'm only going to be 2 weeks late. I don't want them to know I'm having a problem. I'm just going to not talk to them for 2 weeks and then pay them on the 15th. And then I'll be caught up and it will be fine. However, your landlord is expecting to hear from you, is expecting to have that rent payment, is used to you paying rent on time, right? So they might not even call you. They might on the 15th day decide that something is that you are not paying, and that or on the 14th day, they're going to send you a notice, and it's going to be scary, and it's going to say words like eviction and vacate. And to avoid that, it's just easier to tell your landlord, hey, I have some of it now, I'll have some of it later, I'll have it by this date. It doesn't guarantee that your landlord isn't going to try to evict you, but at least it gives you the ability to be transparent and to be the type of person that landlords want to work with, right? So if a landlord hears honestly from somebody they're going to be late, it costs money to hire a lawyer to send a letter to file an eviction. Most landlords are going to want to work with you. So it's important for you to go ahead and tell them. If you are going to pay late or you're going to pay in installments, get it in writing. Because things that are verbal are easy to misconstrue. Parties don't understand what the other one meant, or parties don't want to understand what the other one meant. So if you have something in writing signed by both parties saying Allie's going to pay the rent on the 15th, it makes it a lot clearer what the expectations are. If you are going to, please, when you make a payment arrangement, be sure you can stick to it. If you cannot stick to it, keep the communication open. That way you can adjust it. Again, most landlords are going to want to hear what's happening rather than guess. Paying what you can as a good faith effort is a good idea too. Always get a receipt. In Philadelphia, if no matter what amount of money you owe, if the only reason why you're being evicted is because you cannot pay it because you're behind on your rent, if you come up with that money that you owe and you pay it, you stay in the property. So paying what you can as a good faith effort can keep that balance from getting too high and can keep it easier for you to catch up. Okay. So not paying your rent is common. The second common issue is requesting repairs. This is going to happen when you're in a property, things will not work. And the first thing you're going to want to do when something doesn't work is you're going to want to tell your landlord. And when you tell your landlord, you're going to want to do it in a way that you proved that you told your landlord on a specific date, right? So you're going to want to take a picture of it. You're going to want it to be time-stamped. You're going to want to tell your landlord what's wrong in writing. That can be a text message if you can save it and pull it up. That can be an email. That can be a formal letter. Phone calls are great, but they're hard to prove what was said in them. So even if you do call, you're going to want to send a follow-up email, text, or other letter to make it very clear when you requested this repair, so your landlord knows they are on notice to fix it. So it's very important that you document things as soon as they happen. So you're not held responsible for things that you did not create, right? So if sometimes the instinct is if there's something wrong in the property, it's to hide it because you don't, this is your house, you want to live there, it's not that bad. And you don't want to upset the landlord. But if you immediately tell them, it becomes more clear how it happened, when it happened, and how you can get it fixed quickly. Things you're going to want to report to the Department of License and Inspection are going to be things that affect the habitability of your apartment, right? So habitability is an interesting concept. Habitability describes things that make it necessary to live in the property. So we're talking basics. We're talking floors, ceiling, roof, shelter, access to utilities, including plumbing, and electrical, gas, etc., heat, things you need to live there. If things that are not habitability are going to be cosmetic issues, so chipped paint, floor you do not like, similar things, doors that stick, things that are annoying and that you can request to be fixed, but are not necessary for you to continue living in the property. If you go ahead and report severe habitability issues to your landlord, or you report them to the Department of Licenses and Inspections, your landlord is not allowed to end your lease because you reported a repair, right? And if the landlord tries to do that, you're going to be able to file a complaint with my organization, which is the Fair Housing Commission. I'm going to explain briefly what the Fair Housing Commission is. So the Fair Housing Commission, or the FHC, is an administrative agency. So we're not a court. There's no judges. It's a panel of 5 individuals who were appointed by the mayor who have experience in housing. Some of them are lawyers. Some of them are former landlords or current landlords, tenants, current tenants, grassroots organizers in Philadelphia. And you go in front of this panel of 5 people, and you can file for free against landlords who violate Philadelphia's Fair Housing Ordinance. Every single time the FHC accepts a complaint, you get a hearing. You get to be there. Your landlord has to be there as well, and you're heard by the panel of commissioners. The other thing the FHC does is they make sure that the landlord is properly documented to rent a property. So that's the things we talked about already. So a rental license, the certificate of rental suitability, and a lead safe certificate. As soon as you get a notice to vacate from a landlord, especially where you have reported repairs and the landlord is not working with you or not fixing them quickly enough, you should call the Fair Housing Commission. Once a landlord files to evict in municipal court, it's generally too late for the Fair Housing Commission to take a case. So if you know the property is in bad shape and you know you reported it to the landlord and you get a notice for eviction, your first thought should be Fair Housing Commission. If you're not ever sure if something is a fair housing issue, my contact information will be at the end of the slide. It's better to call than not call, always call. Because again, if they get you in front of a judge, if they file in municipal court to evict, it's going to be too late for the Fair Housing to take the case. What kind of cases do we take? If there are open code violations on your property, there are repairs in your property that the Department of Licenses and Inspections has come out and looked at and said, "Oh, that's not good. The landlord has to fix it." A landlord cannot end your lease. They cannot tell you, "So get out." They have to fix the issue, have the code violation cleared with the Department of Licenses and Inspections. They also cannot boost your rent because you reported a repair or there's a code violation. They cannot change the term of it, make it shorter or longer, and they cannot try and charge you for repairs that they need to take to fix code violations. Additionally, a landlord is not allowed to retaliate. So even if there aren't code violations on the property, if you were to call the Department of Public Health, if you were to call licenses and inspections, if you were to contact any city organization about the property, join a tenant union, or assert a legal right, a landlord cannot end your lease because you did that. Asserting a legal right is kind of broad. The biggest one that we're going to talk about in a little bit is withholding rent. So that's when you do not pay your rent because there is a problem in the property your landlord is not fixing within a reasonable time. In Philadelphia, in order to end a lease that's less than a year, a landlord has to give you a good cause reason. So a good reason to end the lease. If the landlord doesn't give you a reason, they just say, "Get out." Or if you don't believe the reason, you think the reason is wrong or incorrect or fake, you can file with us. If a landlord also takes an action to remove a tenant from the property without due process, which is filing an eviction. So that's self-help eviction. We'll talk about it in a minute, but it's going to be changing locks, boarding windows, disconnecting utilities. Okay, withholding rent. Okay, you should always get legal advice before deciding not to pay or withhold your rent. We'll have a whole slide of legal advice. Before you decide that you're not going to pay your rent for an issue in the property, you're going to want to make sure it's a habitability issue and not a cosmetic issue, which I already talked about. The easiest person who can tell you if it's habitability or cosmetic is going to be a housing lawyer, especially one that does this every day. So withholding is what you do to get your landlord to make repairs. And it's a common defense when you get in front of a judge on why you haven't paid your rent. So the landlord says, "Allie hasn't paid her rent." I say, "No, I haven't. And here's the letter saying why I haven't paid my rent, and my landlord won't fix it." So if a judge determines that the reason why you're not paying your rent is because of a habitability issue, you don't have plumbing, there's a leak, a judge is allowed to reduce the rent you owed based on whether that repair is serious or minor and whether the repair is cosmetic or affects the use of your property. So in order to prove how serious or minor something is or how long it exists, you're going to want proof. So written repair requests, photos and videos, and proof that you have withheld your rent. So a bank account is going to be a big thing that you're going to want. Proof that you have set the rent aside and that you're not just not paying. If you are a Section 8 voucher tenant, do not withhold your rent. The Philadelphia Housing Authority has its own mechanisms where PHA will not pay a portion of your rent. So call PHA before you make any decisions about habitability. They should be able to take action for you. Examples of severe habitability issues, and I already did these, are going to be plumbing stuff, very common in Philly. So leaks, insufficient water pressure and floods, broken appliances, security problems, your door won't latch, your windows won't lock, your windows are broken. Utility issues, so no lights, you smell gas, or the gas isn't reliable, your water isn't reliable, insufficient heat, and that's during the winter months. Another thing that you can do that's asserting a right in addition to withholding your rent is repairing and deducting. This means that with notice to your landlord, you can make minor repairs to the property and deduct the cost from your rent. You need to notify the landlord in writing that you're going to do this, and you need to have a receipt for what you did. So some people get really cute and creative and try to charge for like labor. What you're going to really be able to charge for is the cost of components. So for instance, if you fix a sink leak and you have to buy washers or supplies, you're going to want to have that receipt. phillytenant.org has a really nifty letter to help you of sending, or two letters actually, to tell your landlord you are withholding or you're repairing and deducting. Okay, I can't. Is this the third category, Joan? I'm not totally sure. I feel like I've been talking for years though.
Yeah, this is my section.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and go on mute. Thanks, Joan.
Sure. So we're going to talk about about moving out from the unit and then the eviction process. So we got about 13 minutes left. Okay. So ending a lease early. This is a common area where people will end up in eviction court. You want to read your lease very carefully. You want to read what are the terms of ending a lease. Now, you may see in some leases that there's a penalty, like a financial penalty. We don't typically see landlords go after tenants for that amount. However, if you decide that you don't want to live in a unit anymore and you just move out without telling the landlord, I have seen many times people being brought to court with an eviction complaint and being held accountable for several months where they didn't actually occupy the unit, but the landlord didn't know. And then either the unit was considered abandoned, or in some cases, squatters had taken over. So you just really want to make sure that you cover your bases by having open communication with your landlord about your intentions to vacate the unit. Can you go to the next slide? Okay. So say you're having a roommate issue, you're not able to afford the unit, any type of reason that you would like to move out early, you can consider getting a subleaser. Now, a subleaser is someone who would take over your portion of the lease. For subleasers, the landlord will still conduct a background check, such as a credit check. Just they want to make sure that this person taking over is financially able to hold up their end of the lease. So that is something that that you should consider when you are searching for a subleaser. Some property management companies will help you with a subleaser. That's some companies that work directly with college students. I've seen that with Temple and Drexel. They'll have agencies that help them with that. But not every landlord will be able to assist you. So you're kind of on your own. You do want to get into, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Just get the landlord's permission in writing. That was the other thing.
You're fine, Joan. I just didn't want you to have to ask every time, but that's no problem.
You're fine. So the thing about walkthroughs. So we talked about walking through the property and moving in. Walking out, you want to do the same thing. You want to give the landlord a 30-day notice before leaving. That language will be in your lease of what type of notice you're supposed to give. Take photos of every single room in the property. You don't want to be held liable for any damages that you didn't create. Sometimes units will stay empty for a little bit of time. Sometimes people will break into these properties to either, vandalize or to steal appliances. I've seen it all. I've seen all this whole program is based on different things that have been seen in court. So, so if you did not remove the refrigerator, you want to make sure that you took a picture of that refrigerator still being in the unit. The other big thing, actually give the keys to the landlord. Another thing we've seen in court is that somebody moved out, landlord never got the keys. That's not considered returning possession. So you want to give the landlord keys and get a receipt for them. You get more information about moving out on the phillytenant.org website link listed down at the bottom. I can go to the next one. Okay, getting a security deposit. This is a very common issue that we see. So getting a security deposit, your landlord is supposed to give it to you after the first year, but not all of them do. So a lot of people request it after the move out. What you have to do is send a security deposit request letter. There is a template on phillytenant.org. There's just like a template you can fill out yourself. They have 30 days to respond to you in writing. Now, the landlord will either agree to give you the full amount or they will deduct for different damages to the unit. That could be for carpet cleaning, painting, filling a hole in the wall, etc. Now, if you disagree with your landlord about what the amount you got back, you can actually sue for this in small claims court. If your landlord does not respond at all, you can sue them for 2 times the amount. However, you want to make sure that you actually don't owe the landlord money, such as like unpaid rent or additional money for damages. I can go to the next one. The next thing here, this is like the big elephant in the room, the eviction process. We've been talking about eviction all night. So, this is how a municipal court works. Landlords need to file for eviction, and the first step is an eviction notice, or also known as a notice to vacate. These can either say, 10 days notice, 30 days notice, but that is the first step. That'll indicate what amount the landlord is requesting, or if there are breaches in the lease. Breaches can include, having wild parties, having an unauthorized pet, having unauthorized occupants. So that'll be annotated there. Next step will be getting a court complaint. Court complaint will state the same thing, as well as giving you the hearing date and time. The third part is you go to a hearing. Municipal court hearings there are 2 different pathways. The first one is mediation, where people will work out an agreement, and that can either stipulate uh, something called a JBA, judgment by an agreement. That'll either stipulate move-out terms or a payment arrangement. Commonly, they'll be like, oh, ongoing rent at $850 a month plus 100 plus an extra 100 per month. So when people go to make these agreements, they really want to make sure that it's something that they can afford, because a lot of times we've seen people that are unrepresented, they'll just be very desperate to get out of court because it's a very intimidating place. So they'll agree to an amount, and then down the line, they run into some type of financial hardship and they end up breaching the agreement. But when they breach the agreement, agreements they're not appealable. So this agreement is final. So what they have to do is then answer the breach in court, and it becomes another whole legal process. They have to provide proof of why they breached the agreement, and then it's up to the judge and whether or not that reason is, correct in their eyes. So just want to make sure that you understand what you're signing. The other pathway in municipal court is a trial. Those are more on the rare side. I spent a lot of time in court, and I've only seen really contentious cases go before the judge. I'm sure Allie's had other experiences being, more in the tenant landlord world. But that's how they work. Now, if somebody breaches their agreement or loses a trial, a lockout can occur. That's a 21-day process. There's things called a writ of possession, then the alias writ of possession. The alias writ of possession is served to you by a judge. I'm sorry, by a sheriff, and that's docketed. That's on the court docket, and you'll be able to see like a date and time of when the upcoming lockout will occur by the sheriff's department. Next slide. So why should you go to your court date? Because if you don't go to your court date, this will result in a default judgment, and default judgment can be, a couple of things. You could have won your case by having different defenses, but now you have this judgment out there, and that'll hamper your ability to rent units down the line. So it's really important that you pay attention to all court notices and follow directions and go to the hearing dates when you have them. Why should you get a lawyer? As I stated before, people can get locked into agreements that they're not fully understanding. So you want to have somebody there that's on your side. You can go to the next one. Eviction diversion program. This is a relatively new program born out of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are now 2 different pathways. There's one, the direct negotiation, which has to be done within 30 days of the notice that is sent out. On the slide here, this is the mediation with the housing counselor pathway. So you're sent a notice of diversion rights. You are then sent to work with a housing counselor. The next step is mediation between a tenant, landlord, and a housing counselor will result in an agreement. Now there is something called targeted financial assistance, where tenants can get up to $3,500 in rental assistance. So it's very important that people pay attention to the notices that are sent to them. And then if mediation is unsuccessful, that the landlord can file in court after 30 days. Next slide. In-court resources. So we have a courtroom navigator, and they help unrepresented tenants kind of navigate the court process and explain which resources are available. We also have the Lawyer of the Day program, which provides direct representation to tenants, and it's pretty self-explanatory. There is an organization we work with called Clarify. They offer financial counseling for vulnerable tenants. We frequently refer people there. And then Tenant Landlord Help Center is currently not staffed, so we don't have to go over that one. Next one, please. Right to Counsel. This is another new initiative that that is gradually being expanded throughout the city, and eventually every zip code in the city will have access to every low-income tenant who has an eviction case or faces losing their housing subsidy will have the right to have an attorney represent them in their case. And this applies to the tenants that are under 200% of the poverty level. Right now we're in 19121, 19139, 19134, and 19144. And I apologize for talking fast, but I know you guys probably have questions. All right, next slide, please. Where can we go for legal help? This will all be sent out to you guys, so I'm not going to go over that, just to leave room for questions. Self-help evictions, big one. We see this all the time. So landlords decide, hey, I don't want to hire a lawyer. I don't want to wait for my property to be vacant. I want to sell it now. They'll do all sorts of things. They'll either cut off utilities, remove doors, remove windows. I've seen it all. So those are all self-help eviction initiatives. So what we recommend people do is, number one, call the police. The police department in the area, they're aware. We've done a lot of outreach with them to make them aware of what self-help eviction practices are and what the next steps are. They can also file complaints with the Attorney General's office. When people call me and they have an illegal lockout issue, I always recommend have something on your person that shows that you have a lawful right to that building. So an ID, keep your ID address current. Any utility bills, keep one of those on your person just to make sure. This will happen. I see this happen a lot with rooming houses, which those are a whole nother issue that we don't have time for. But yeah, just have something with your ID on your person. Next slide. Good cause for eviction. So a landlord cannot end a lease for less than 1 year without providing a good cause reason. They have to end it in writing. Now, examples of good cause is non-payment, habitual late payment, nuisance activity, that could be fighting, loud music, crazy dogs barking all times of night, refusing the landlord access. The landlord needs to make a repair and the tenant's not letting them in. That's a reason. They want to sell the property or they want to move into the property. Those are all good cause reasons. Next one. Okay, good cause challenge. So within 15 days of receiving good cause notice, the tenant may file a complaint with the Fair Housing Commission to challenge the good cause. And both parties will be given an opportunity to present the evidence and basically discuss it. Questions?
And I'm sorry, I bogarted more than half. Questions? All right, everyone, no one's saying they have a question. Okay, well, if anyone does have questions, our contact information, I believe, is in the PowerPoint presentation. If not, we'll make sure it gets to you. Hillary, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we go ahead and head out? I don't think anybody has any questions.
No, thank you very much. Certainly, I mean, people might have my email if they got the Zoom link through registration. If you have follow-up questions and you want to send them, reach out to myself, reach out to your own program director, and we will make sure you get the information that you need.
Hello, Erica Davis. Sorry. I jumped in a little bit late. So you're going to send this presentation to us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Amazing. Thank you so much. This was really, for the part that I heard, it was really good. It was really informative. I know you were trying to speed through so you can get to 7 o'clock, but from what I heard, it was clear, concise. It was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.